Everybody, they got him. They got Trump. They got our boy. What are we gonna do?
Injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.
What is up, everyone? I think that was the best intro I've ever recorded. During the theme song, I texted Carlos and Noah and I said, guys, I just did the best intro that we've ever done. What's up, everyone? Happy Friday. Hope they arrest Hillary next. Damn right. Hello, Comrade Eddie. Hello, Jacob. So, yes, Trump got arrested. Trump surrendered himself to the police. Obviously, he's been let out now, but it's a pretty big deal. It was a big enough deal for me to break out my Drain the Swamp hat. I've worn this for a few TikToks, but never worn it for a stream. But I figured today it would be perfect. And you know, with my mullet and this flannel, I'm looking like every Trump supporter I know. I actually look like one right now. So, which I've been told many times before when I tell people I'm a communist, they say, but you look like a Trump supporter. And I'm like, what does that mean? But this is what it means. I get it now. Yeah, big news. Here's the mugshot. I got it pulled up. This is obviously all over the internet right now. Surprisingly, Trump put out his first tweet since 2021 after this went down. And, you know, obviously said never surrender. This is election interference. It's a witch hunt. And that's got millions and millions of likes now, as does the post he made about it on his Instagram. So, yeah, I just want to give my analysis of what I think this means and what I think is going on right now. So here is CBS News article. You can see they got Trump's mugshot there. Former President Donald Trump surrendered Thursday at the Fulton County Jail, where he was booked on 13 felony counts related to an alleged scheme to overturn the results of the presidential election. His surrender in Georgia marks the fourth time this year that the former president has turned himself in after criminal charges were brought against him by federal and state officials. But it's the first time that he was subjected to a mugshot. It's also routine for defendants to be fingerprinted and have their eyes scanned. So, yeah, accusing him of election interference. Obviously, the defense that Trump brought up was that Hillary, as well as Stacey Abrams in Georgia, but Hillary especially, denied the results of the 2016 election, right? Hillary has basically been on a campaign ever since she lost that election, saying that it was Russia. That the reason she lost was because there were so many Russian plants and Russian bots who were boosting Donald Trump. And they interfered in the election and allowed him to win. Now, obviously, Hillary Clinton didn't incite people to storm the Capitol, but it's a fair defense. And of course, we know that the Democrats are just as crooked, just as corrupt, just as rotten as any of the Republicans. And what they're likely looking to do here is put Trump away so he can't run in 2024, because Trump is the biggest threat to Biden being reelected in 2024. He's dominating the Republican primary. The polling between him and Biden that I've seen is still pretty close, but he's the main guy who can challenge Biden and the Democratic Party's power. So they're trying to basically use what we call as Marxists lawfare, using the legal system to put him away so he can't challenge the political establishment. And of course, I had a tweet go viral the other day about all the imperialistic, pro-capitalist, terrible things that Trump did when he was president, right? We know he's an anti-establishment figure, but he's not an anti-imperialist figure, not an anti-capitalist figure, of course. And his interview that he did with Tucker Carlson recently, when the Republican debates were going on, he did this interview with Carlson kind of as a protest against the debates. All they did was bash China, right? All they did was say, yeah, the war with Russia is stupid, but we need to focus on war with China, which, of course, as Noah Kratchvik, Midwestern Marx editor, said, it's the same war. It's the U.S.'s new Cold War against the East, against these rising powers who are moving us towards a multipolar world rather than a U.S.-dominated unipolar world. So, and I think Trump talking about China might be him showing that he's scared of the deep state, right? He's scared of these intelligence agencies and the American political apparatus that's coming after him. So he's like, yeah, okay, I'm criticizing the war in Ukraine, but I won't criticize the war in China, or I'll still push for the war in China. Just don't arrest me. That's kind of what it seems like at this point. But yeah, crazy. Ross, thank you so much for the €5 super chat, Ross. I'll get you some pizza soon. I'm sorry I don't have any pizza right now. But let's take a look at Trump's tweet and Instagram response and what I think the result of this will be, because of course the Democrats are celebrating this as a win, right? We got Trump locked away, we got this crook locked away, but regardless of what you think of Trump's arrest and the prosecution being brought against him, there are millions and millions of Americans who believe that this is a political witch hunt, who believe that this is just the Democrats trying to knock Trump out of the election while accusing him of election interference, right? That's the charges they're bringing up against him, when clearly the Democrats are looking to do a little bit of election interference of their own. So I think look at the response, 1.3 million likes. And obviously this is Trump's first tweet since 2021. It's going to attract a lot of attention, regardless of what it is. But, I do think this is only going to consolidate his base of support behind him, which, I mean, he's kept that strong base of support since 2016. And I don't know. I think it might backfire against the Democrats really hard. I think a lot of Americans are going to look at this and see it as what Trump is portraying it as, a political witch hunt to try and knock Trump out of the 2024 election. Because Biden has done next to nothing for the working people of America to earn our vote, right? And they're scared that they can't earn our vote in 2024, so they're trying to knock him out. I think a lot of people are going to see that as what's going on here. Obviously, you'll have the Democratic diehards and the people who refuse to ever criticize the Democratic Party and the liberals, who will just celebrate this as a win. But those people were going to vote Democrat anyways. I think there's a lot of people who this is actually going to turn on the side of Trump if he's not, locked up and prevented from running in the 2024 election. The most ridiculous part about it is when these liberal media talking heads like MSNBC and CNN and these pundits get on there like, well, Trump questioned the 2020 election. He questioned it, he questioned our democracy. What a piece of garbage. And it's like, have you not been paying attention to anything that Hillary Clinton's been doing? Ever since she lost in 2016, she's been on a media tour saying that the election was rigged against her by Russian interference with no evidence, with literally no evidence. So the hypocrisy is really insane. And yeah, I just would encourage people to not let Trump derangement syndrome blind them on this issue. Obviously, I'm not a Trump fan, but you can still see it for what it is. see what the Democrats are doing for what it is. You know, it's them trying to knock out one of their political opponents here going into 2024. And then this is a tweet I made. This is what progressives are doing instead of fighting for healthcare. This is Jamal Bowman, someone who portrays himself as an extremely progressive politician. I think he's included like as part of the squad now, or at least squad adjacent, right? He's one of those people who's supposed to fight against corruption and fight to actually drain the swamp. But this is what he's spending his time. Okay, I'm sorry. I get that a lot of people don't like Trump and a lot of people are celebrating his arrest. Sure, more power to you. But Trump getting arrested has or does nothing to affect the everyday lives of working class Americans. Trump getting arrested does nothing to get working class Americans health care, to put food on their table, to raise their wages, to give them the right to a union, to give them more control at the workplace. All right, it does nothing. And but the political arena is where the squad has put their effort, right? Where they put their focus is we're better than Republicans, you know, and latching on to the Democratic Party's attempt to portray themselves as better than Republicans or attack Republicans, right? So their energy isn't spent on fighting for healthcare, giving fiery speeches on the floor of Congress saying you guys are all taking money from the insurance industry and taking money from the pharmaceutical industry, right? Their effort is spent teaming up with the Democrats to attack Trump because, you know, Democrats better than Republicans. So it just seems really ridiculous to me that these are the people who are supposed to be fighting for healthcare, who are supposed to be the uncorrupt ones, who are supposed to be the good guys in Congress. And they've achieved absolutely nothing for working class Americans. 40,000 people are still dying every year in this country because they don't have access to basic health insurance. And they're celebrating Trump getting arrested for 2 minutes as, you know, the biggest victory that they've achieved. We did it. We did it. Sure, Americans are still dying because they can't afford insulin, but Trump got arrested. We did it. No, you didn't, Jamal. Nobody cares about this. I mean, people care about this, but it doesn't do anything to improve my life, your life, the life of other working class people. It's just stupid. The Duran recently did an interview with a lawyer from Georgia that goes into good depth about this constitutional travesty. Yeah, the Duran has a really nuanced opinion on it. They're lawyers, I believe. So, you know, they're looking at this from a legal standpoint and saying, you know, basically this is just the Democrats trying to take out their political opponent, right? They don't have much of an actual case to bring against Trump, except that he's a blatant racist. Good point, Dust. I'm sure that would hold up in court. He's a blatant racist. Therefore, arrest him. I mean, all other presidents should be tried in the ICC for war crimes. Of course, right? That's the other irony here is when is George Bush going to be arrested? George Bush literally admitted that the war in Iraq was illegal and unjustified and a brutal invasion. When's he going to be arrested for lying to Congress and lying to the American public in order to kill millions of people in Iraq? When's Obama going to be arrested? Obama and Hillary destroyed Libya. They launched an intervention in Libya led by NATO, which toppled Libya's central government and then left with no exit plan at all. No exit plan at all. Just toppled their central government and fucking dipped. And now Libya is in a state of perpetual civil war. They've got warlords fighting each other in the power vacuum that was created, just like what happened in Iraq. And things like open air slave markets have returned to the country because there's no central government to put a stop to it. When are Obama and Hillary going to jail for that? Or when is Hillary going to jail for questioning the 2016 election and fabricating this giant hoax that Russia was the reason she lost, including feeding fake stories to the corporate media about Trump and his connections to Russia so that she could frame that election as rigged? When is she being brought up on charges for that? Of course, that's never going to happen. Of course, our legal system, our bourgeois legal system, protects these bourgeois politicians in the deep state. But because Trump has run afoul with the Democrats and the Democratic establishment, they're happy to use the legal system to indict him. They've been looking for a way to prosecute Trump since 2016. This is just the first thing that's they've been actually able to gain ground with. Also, I'm happy that other independent channels are starting to name drop Midwestern Marx and starting to show Eddie's YouTube shorts. Cool. Who showed my shorts? That's awesome. It's great to hear. Yeah, I've definitely noticed a spike in popularity and the amount that people are talking about us since the whole Oliver Anthony debacle, since we landed that interview. But Obama and Hillary should be at the Hague, for we came, we saw, he died. Grotesque. Exactly. Even Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky said a lot of good stuff when he's criticizing the U.S. I obviously disagree completely with his views on Leninism and on existing socialism, but even he said every post-World War II president would be hanged if the Nuremberg laws or the Nuremberg trial standards were upheld. And if we held American presidents to the same standard that we held the Nazis to, they would all be hanged because they've all supported genocides. They've all supported these horrific, illegal interventions, imperialist interventions aimed at plundering other countries' resources. Obama did it. Hillary did it. Trump did it. And that's the thing, too. They're not bringing Trump up on charges for sanctioning Venezuela, for increasing the embargo on Cuba or putting the embargo back on them after the Pope pressured Obama to alleviate it, or launching missiles at Syria. In fact, those are the things Trump was praised for by the media and by the Democratic establishment. No, they're doing it because of supposed election fraud, when there are all these legitimate things, killing Qasem Soleimani. Actually, there were some lawyers in Iraq who sued Trump for the murder of Qasem Soleimani, Iran's general and national hero, by drone. But they're not bringing him up on charges for that. Of course not. Because then they'd have to charge every existing president. Then they'd have to charge their own. Is Bill Clinton to blame for Yugoslavia? I mean, Bill Clinton and NATO and, of course, the extremist groups in Yugoslavia that the U.S. was able to prey upon, like the Kosovo Liberation Army, the KLA. But yeah, Bill Clinton was leading up the intervention, for sure. And he should be tried at the Hague for that. I had something else I was going to say about Trump. It was a good line. I can't remember what it was. I forget. What's up, Sam? How's it going? Mission accomplished. Yes, that's Jamal Bowman. Mission accomplished. 60% of Americans are still in debt because of our corrupt healthcare system, but at least Trump had to stop in at the Fulton County Jail. We did it. We did it. Everybody celebrate. Working class people celebrate. We still don't have healthcare, but Trump had to stop in at a jail. Does Oliver know you're all Marxists? Probably. We are called Midwestern Marx. Although right now I look like a conservative. I look literally like every conservative in my town. This is what I should dress up as for Halloween. But I mean, like when we sent Oliver Anthony the interview request, we have our like signatures at the bottom. It says Midwestern Marx, and it's got our logo. And he's been emailing back and forth with us, so I'm assuming he knows. Doesn't seem like he cares. I keep hearing about stuff from Oliver Anthony. Are you going to bring this up with him? Yeah, we'll give him a chance to push. I'm not going to bring up everything because there are some things that I just don't agree with as far as the critiques, but we'll give him a chance to like push back against the things that he's been accused of online. We'll give him a chance to clarify his position on welfare and stuff like that. As far as the anti-Semitic dog whistles, he was liking videos that are criticizing the state of Israel and more specifically Mossad, the Israeli intelligence services, who, documents have shown that they had interaction with the 9/11 terrorists and basically didn't do enough to like lock them up or kind of just let them go. Right. And what happens every single time you criticize Israel? What happens? People call you anti-Semitic, right? They say criticizing Israel is the same as criticizing Jewish people. It's not. Criticizing Mossad, especially the Israeli intelligence forces who have committed tons of assassinations and have done terrible, terrible things in conjunction with the CIA. Criticizing them is not anti-Semitic. The videos that Oliver Anthony was watching were criticizing Mossad. Right. So the people who are calling him anti-Semitic, I think, are just using that same old trope that the liberals always use of if you criticize the apartheid state of Israel, which gets billions of dollars a year from the U.S. to enforce an apartheid on the Palestinian people, therefore you're anti-Semitic. So I don't plan to bring that up with him because I would see it as a waste of time. Smash the like button. Yes, thank you. Get everybody in here. Smash that like button. Once you kick that hornet's nest, they really go after you, huh? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I knew we'd be kicking a hornet's nest. Like, Carlos doesn't spend as much time on Twitter as me. Well, I've been trying to spend way less time on Twitter lately, but... And he sent me the thumbnail for that Oliver Anthony video. I'm like, oh, boy, here we go. We're going to get a lot of pushback for this. And I don't think he was expecting all the pushback that we got. But yeah, if you kick a hornet's nest, the hornets are going to come. If the populist left doesn't grab Oliver Anthony, then the right will. Simple politics. Exactly. Right. We're going to try and push him towards our positions. We're going to show him that the left or the working class struggle isn't made up of just a bunch of terminally online leftists who are trying to cancel him. We're going to try and bring him to our position, bring him to the side of class struggle, and get him to show solidarity with certain labor struggles that are going on. Right? Like that's going to be one of our strategies, is to try and get him to show solidarity with like the GM strikes that are coming up, or the John Deere strikes that happened a while back, or the Amazon unionization efforts. Right, get him. He expressed so many problems that the American working class experiences in that song. Right, so we want to push him towards the correct solutions, meaning the collective organizing of the working class. So he should write an intro song for the show. That would be freaking sick. That would be so sick. So that is where the 9/11 thing came up from, a recent thing I heard. Thank you for this. I was legit having anxiety and holding up from calling him out. You're good. You're good. Yeah, I explained that to someone the other day. They were like, Oliver Anthony's a right winger. He's doing anti-Semitic dog whistles. And I just explained, like, this is what the video he was watching that people are calling anti-Semitic was a critique of Israel, and more specifically a critique of Mossad, and how Mossad overlooked, or even at one point propped up who ended up being the 9/11 terrorist attackers. So, it's not anti-Semitic at all. And then that person never responded to me. They read it and didn't respond. I'm like, okay. Hopefully they got the right idea, but all right, let's move on. else did I want to talk about? Oh, yeah, Capital Volume 3. Bada bing, bada boom. I've been digging into this lately. Very good. I just recently finished Capital Volume 2. I'm still on the intro written by Ernest Mandel, but it's super interesting. Volume 1 obviously focuses on production, the production of value in the workplace. Volume 2 focuses on the realization of that value, so the sale of it in the market. Then Volume 3 focuses on both the sphere of production and the sphere of circulation. So it's really interesting how the argument builds to this point where you're now asking these questions about the rate of profit and how surplus value is divided up between the capitalists, between the bourgeoisie and the landlords and the bankers, and how credit affects all of that. It makes you think back to reading Volume 1 when you're reading about how surplus value is produced by the workers. It's like, wow, how far we've come. That we started with an analysis of surplus value being produced, and now we've gotten to the point where we're looking at how that surplus value is divided up amongst the bourgeoisie, divided up amongst the capitalists. So, Volume 2 and Volume 3 are a little bit drier than Volume 1, but they're definitely worth the read, right? If you want to understand the circuit of industrial capital, if you want to understand the capitalist mode of production in its totality, you have to read 2 and 3. You just have to. If you want to engage with like modern economists, neoclassical economists, the kind of economists that they'll show you if you take economics in Western university courses, you have to read volumes 2 and 3, because that's where Marx talks about the market, and he talks about supply and demand and the distribution of that value that's created in production. So, I'm reading pre-capitalist economic formations for the first time, finally taking advantage of working in a library. Nice. That sounds like an awesome read. That's cool that you work in a library. Yeah, you should take advantage of that. One summer I worked at a mailroom and I got so much reading done. I also watched a lot of anime, unfortunately, but all I had to do was sit there and sort the mail every once in a while. So, should I learn Hegel before digging into Marx? You don't have to. It'll help. It'll help you understand Marx's method better. And because the thing is, what people tell you is that Hegel was an idealist and Marx flipped him on his head, and Marx turned Hegel into a materialist, or he took Hegel's philosophy and made it materialist. And in many ways he did, but it's not that he, saying that he flipped it on its head, I think is a poor description. It's not that he flipped the entire philosophy on its head, it's that he took it further. Right, took it into the concrete. Like Hegel is basically, Carlos calls him a proto-materialist, right? Because he's very close to doing the same thing that Marx does, and saying that spirit or idea or humans' collective consciousness is different in different areas based on their material reality, based on the material basis of those areas. So that's him approaching, dialectical materialism. He just doesn't take it far enough. He doesn't look at the dialectical relationship between the abstract or concrete and abstract, but at the same time, he kind of does. So it's important to read Hegel if you want to know what Hegel actually thought, and if you want to know how Marx actually built off his work. But it's also very complicated. Like everybody talks about how, how complicated Marxism is and how hard it is to get through Capital. And like, yes, but then try reading the phenomenology of spirit, right? Then pick up some Hegel and read intros, or what is it? Lecture on the history of philosophy, lectures on the history of philosophy, which I mean is what beginners should read if you're going to dig into Hegel, but it's much, much more difficult than Marx. Hegel did not think very much about his philosophy being interpreted by the masses, right? Being interpreted by regular working people, which is why I feel like overall his work isn't as important, because you're not going to get that many regular working class people reading Hegel. But for Marxists, it's good to eventually dig into it. I mean, Lenin said you need to systematically read and understand Hegel if you want to systematically read and understand Marxism, which is like, come on, Lenin, do you understand how much reading you're telling me to do here? I have to read the entire work, all the works of Hegel. Then I have to read all the works of Marx. I can barely get through Marx. And it can be kind of a daunting task when you first set out. But if you want to have a fully fleshed out understanding of Marxism, you do need to read Hegel first. Carlos always makes fun of the way I say Hegel. Hegel's bagels. But yeah, I would read it at some point, but it's not a necessity. It will help you. The other thing is, like, the first three chapters of Capital are written in a very similar style to Hegel. It's written dialectically. And if you've read Hegel and understood him first, it'll make the first three chapters of Capital much, 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 much easier for you. But you can also understand those three chapters of Capital without reading Hegel if you just read them a couple times. And the book gets much easier after that. So even if you don't understand the first three chapters, you can still go on with the book, and then go back to those three chapters once you've understood more. And they should make more sense to you. I remember the first time I read the book, I didn't understand anything in the first three chapters. Then I went back and read it again. I'm like, oh, everything's right here in these first three chapters. The whole argument is kind of condensed here. So they're fun chapters to read. It just takes a lot of background knowledge. Thanks, you bet. Did Marx read other materialists like Epicurus? Yes. Yes. Lenin and Marx both were advocates of reading everything. Lenin has some fire quote. It's like, we must enrich ourselves with all the treasures of humanity or humankind, meaning like read the classics, read non-Marxist philosophy, read ancient Greek philosophy, like all these works that are upheld by society as being great works. They're upheld that way for a reason. And you should engage with all of them. And if you want to understand Marxism, you also have to go back and understand the philosophers who influenced Marx. So Democritus was what his thesis was on, I believe. I wish Carlos was here because he could give you a better answer than me. But build the wall? No, that was Trump's stupidest policy. I swear. I get how it's a populist policy, to have tighter immigration control so that the cost of labor, aka wages, can't be driven down. But where else could we put that money other than building a giant wall between us and Mexico? Also, most people fly over the border. Also, the number one thing you can do to stop immigration is end imperialism, right? Like, if you stop starving people with sanctions in Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela, people will stop leaving. If you stop throwing Syria into a civil war by dumping money and arms into terrorist groups, people will stop leaving. If NATO doesn't lead an intervention against Libya that destroys their central government and allows slavery to return to the country, immigrants will stop leaving Libya. Like, generally, people don't want to leave their homes, right? Generally, people don't want to dip everyone they know and everyone they love and everything they've known and flee to another country. And these conditions are largely created by imperialism, either the exploitation of these countries that prevents them from developing their productive forces and causes people to leave because of the poverty, or just because of warfare. Like, for the last however many years, Syria has been in a state of civil war, ongoing civil war. That's dangerous. It's not a place you want to bring up your children, right? So, and historically, the diaspora of an imperialized or colonized country always goes to the country that's colonizing them, which makes sense psychologically. Like in Algeria, tons of Algiers, or is that how you say it? Algiers? There are tons of Algerian people went to France, because if this country's colonizing you, if they're exploiting you and oppressing you, you're going to think, well, that country's got to be rich and that country's got to be safe, right? They have the power, they have the might to colonize my country. I should go there because they're not being colonized and they have all this wealth that they've stolen. So it makes sense psychologically why the diaspora would go to the colonizer country. But that's always what happens. It's a very interesting thing where when a country's colonized, people often flee to the colonizing country. right? So build that wall is such a stupid slogan, such a stupid idea. And we'll build a wall between us and Mexico. Right? How about we end the war on drugs? How about we end end the war on drugs that's created this giant black market, and decriminalize drugs, so there isn't this giant black market where cartels can make tons of money by bringing drugs over the border. How about that? How about we stop sanctioning countries in the Caribbean, like I said? How about we stop bombing and destroying countries in North Africa, in the Middle East, or West Asia? That seems like a much more productive and effective solution for getting rid or reducing the amount of immigrants there are and people fleeing their home countries. The difference between Democritean and Epicurean philosophy of nature. That was Marx's thesis. Nice. Carlos writes a lot about the Greek philosophers and the purity fetish, especially Epicurus. TikTok diaspora are cringe examples, though. Dude, the Iranian TikTok diaspora hates me. They're the ones who got one of my accounts banned for sure. You can't say anything. You can't say anything about Iran, dude. You could be like, yes, Iran has their problems. Iran is not a socialist or communist country. And, I wish they were, but they're not. That being said, I do not support U.S. regime change or U.S. color revolution attempts against Iran. And you'll have like 5 immigrants from Iran who coincidentally always look super white and are usually like 2nd or 3rd generation immigrants, not people who actually fled Iran. But they'll be telling you, you piece of shit, you don't understand my country, you don't understand how evil their government is. You're supporting the Iranian theocracy. It's like, I literally just said, I don't want the U.S. to overthrow their government because that would make the situation worse. And, it doesn't matter how much nuance you inject into your videos. They're still going to smear you and weaponize their identity against you, which is all they have. I'm Iranian, you're not. Shut the hell up, white boy. Okay. I guess I'll support U.S. regime change now because I'm white. That seems kind of racist, but... They show you women shopping with their hair down and call it freedom. Yeah, and you can't even explain, like the U.S. wants to destroy Iran because like 70% of the Iranian economy, including all of their banks and most of their major industry, is owned by the state. It's owned by the government. It's publicly owned or owned by the people, you could say. So what does that mean? That means that Western multinationals can't plunder Iran for their resources. They can't use Iran as a way to enrich themselves. So they want regime change. And we know the U.S. doesn't just lead regime change against socialist or communist countries. The first regime change effort led by the CIA in Guatemala against Jacobo Arbenz, they smeared him as a communist. They said he was a socialist and that communism was taking over Guatemala. But he wasn't. He just wanted to redistribute some of the land that the United Fruit Company wasn't even using to the people. Right? The land that the United Fruit Company wasn't using productively to grow food, they wanted to redistribute and give to the people. And the U.S. had him ousted for that in a coup led by Carlos Castillo Armas. And then Jacobo Arbenz was found boiled to death in a bathtub. Right? So you don't just have to be a communist or a socialist to get targeted by the empire. So that's why we need to stand with the sovereignty of Iran and stand against U.S. regime change in Iran. Here's the Lacerdo graph that I always bring up. You can't have socialism. You can't have right to economic well-being without sovereignty, right? If the U.S. overthrows the Iranian government and throws that country into chaos, there's no hope of them building socialism out of that. But if the Iranian people are able to hang on to their sovereignty, then they have a chance of building socialism. And I do, support working class movements in Iran. What I don't support is U.S.-backed color revolution attempts, U.S.-backed regime change efforts intended to topple Iran's government and the economy that's largely in the hands of the public and transfer it to Western multinationals, allow Western multinationals to pillage the country. A good way to judge how bad the U.S. wants to destroy a country is to look at the Economic Freedom Index designed by the Heritage Foundation. It's like a Koch brothers think tank. And they assign an economic freedom score to every country, right? And the lower a country's economic freedom score, the more likely it is that the U.S. is going to want to do regime change. So this is Iran. Iran's economic freedom score is 42.2, making its economy the 169th freest in the 2023 index. So way down towards the bottom. Whereas look at the countries with high economic freedom: the UAE, Israel, Qatar, Bahrain, Jordan, Saudi Arabia. These are all countries where the U.S. is free to exploit, or the countries towards the top especially. The UAE is basically like a U.S. oil state. Qatar is, there's other resources there besides oil, but a bunch of my buddies in the military got sent to Qatar to basically guard the resources, guard the oil. These are countries with the high economic freedom score who allow Western multinationals to pillage them and do whatever they want. And that's what, the Koch brothers consider economic freedom. If you let us, Western capitalists and Western banks, pillage your country and do whatever we want to your country, that's a high level of economic freedom. If you don't do that, if you nationalize a good deal of your economy, then you lose points and your economic freedom score goes down. So the more that you give the U.S. and Western capitalists what they want, the higher the economic freedom score. The less you do, the lower your economic freedom score. So, coincidentally, the countries who the U.S. is sanctioning and trying to destroy with regime change efforts are the countries with lower economic freedom scores. But these are oftentimes countries that provide their people health care, that are bringing people out of poverty, that are advancing their productive forces. Like in the case of Iran, they're making tons of breakthroughs in medicine and medical research. But that's not economic freedom. Economic freedom is when the Koch brothers have the right to take all your country's oil and make a killing off of it. So that's something. I had a speaker from the Heritage Foundation come to my school in college and talk to us about the economic freedom score. And actually, our economics professor, who was a Keynesian, asked me to go and provide pushback because he knew that I was not in favor of that neoliberal style of economics and style of economic thinking. So I did, and that's what I realized. I'm like, all the countries with the low, he gave us a pamphlet. I'm like, all these countries with the low economic freedom score are the countries the U.S. is trying to destroy. The U.S. is trying to destroy them because their industries are nationalized. Their banks are in the hands of the state. They're not in the hands of Western multinationals, like the entire Ukrainian economy is now, ever since the U.S. got a hold there. And that's what we often call shock therapy or privatization, liberalization, when those state-run industries are sold off to Western multinationals. That's what happened in Chile after the overthrow of Salvador Allende, when they put Pinochet back in power. Western multinationals pillaged the economy and all the industry was sold off to these Western capitalists. And the Western capitalists and economists called it an economic miracle. Look how much economic freedom they have now under Pinochet. Isn't this amazing? Look at how high our profits have gotten ever since we overthrew Allende and put Pinochet in power. Meanwhile, starvation increased, malnutrition increased, homelessness increased. Every economic metric you could use to measure well-being of the people got worse, but there was higher economic freedom for the corporations. So they called it an economic miracle. That's just the framework that they look at everything through. The freer the market, the freer the people. Freedom just means freedom for the exploiters, freedom for capital. Suburbanites think they country because they drive pickups. Dude, that's everybody who dressed like this in my high school. Not everybody. Like, there were some legit farm kids, but like a lot of legit farm kids. It was a rural community, but usually they didn't talk about it, right? They would just like work on the farm, and that's how they were. A lot of them were on the wrestling team. But then you would have the kids who like live in town and they're wearing like a flannel jeans and like boots to school every day, and like a cowboy hat or a Make America Great Again hat. And it's like, you live in town. You don't live on a farm. Why? Why are you dressing? Why are you cosplaying as a farmer? People can do whatever they want, but I mean, that's kind of the thing in a rural community is, everyone then wants to embrace the rural culture and be seen as a hick, a redneck. I love my hometown, though. They're good peoples. Israel is the best country for LGBTQ in the Middle East. Right. The only democracy in the Middle East. That's woke imperialism right there. Thank you so much for the super chats, Dog Eater. I really, really appreciate that. And thank you for being a YouTube member. Appreciate that a ton. Thank you, comrade. I see you didn't leave a super chat, but sent a super sticker. Appreciate that a ton. $10. That's huge. What CA? Is that California? Gotta look it up. I'm learning my currencies. Canada. I knew that. I knew that before I even Googled it. 10 Canadian dollars. Let's go. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Appreciate that a ton. I also appreciate Dog Eater for sending another one. Why doesn't the USA join the International Criminal Court? I don't know. Are they not part of it? U.S. is not. What do they? That's so weird. I didn't even know that. Because I knew that the U.S., this says that they participated in the negotiations that led to the creation of the court. I know that they pushed for it to be created, and that it's oftentimes serves as a kangaroo court that just helps the U.S. push for whatever they want. Like in Yugoslavia, even though Milosevic was eventually absolved. But that doesn't make any sense to me that they're not actually a part of it. Interesting. I got to learn that history better. If anyone knows, let me know. California? Really? It was a joke. I know California doesn't have their own currency. I totally knew that. I hear California is going to secede soon. I heard someone talking about that the other day. One sec. If you guys ever get bored of sending super chats and you want to send me the real thing, this is a viewer sent me this a while back. This is from the Central Bank of the Islamic Republic of Iran. See, they got Khomeini on their currency there. And shout out to whoever sent me this. I don't know if they still watch the show or not, but this is another one from Iran. And then this is from the República Bolivariana de Venezuela. The Banco Central de Venezuela. 2,000 bolívares. This is a bolivar. So yeah, there's Venezuela's currency that you heard so much about on the American media that they tried to blame for all of Venezuela's economic problems. It's because of their currency. It's not because colonialists made Venezuela dependent on oil before we sanctioned the shit out of their oil industry. It's all because of the currency. Watch my video, What About Venezuela? Socialism Fails Every Time, debunked, if you want to learn more about Venezuela, or read my thesis from college about it. How do you push back against libs that have concerns over countries' cultural values, that things will organically change with economic progress? Yeah, and that countries have a right to determine their own cultural values, right? Like, we don't have a right to say we are the West and we are superior to you culturally, so, we're going to enforce our values on you. That's cultural imperialism. And that's what woke imperialism ends up being a lot of the time. Like, countries have a right to determine their own cultural values, and we want them to be determined democratically. But as you said, you'll never have progress in terms of that, in terms of cultural progress and being more accepting and stuff like that, if you don't have economic progress, right? Yeah, I guess that's all I really have to say about it. Like even what was going on in Qatar this year was a good example, right? Like people were bringing LGBTQ flags and stuff and trying to push that on Qatar. Like, that's fine. Make your protest. And obviously I have my own feelings about it. I'm very tolerant. I wish people were allowed to do whatever they wanted everywhere. But I also understand Qatar has their own cultural values, right? It's a very heavily Muslim society, right? So I don't think the U.S. can say, well, they don't have the same cultural values as us or the same LGBTQ policies as us, so we can do an invasion or so we can do imperialism against them, right? You should have respect for other countries' values while still advocating, for tolerance and still advocating for oppressed people. But yeah, you just have to see through when it's being used for regime change efforts. Like there was an article for Human Rights Watch. We should honestly go through this sometime. Human Rights Watch did this article about like transgenderism in China, where they just talked to like 10 Chinese people on the phone and had them say their parents were discouraging them or doctors were discouraging them from being transgender. It's very slight evidence. But then that story was picked up by the media. And they said China anti-trans, China cracking down on trans people, Chinese doctors hurting trans people. And the goal of Human Rights Watch publishing that and the media doing that isn't to protect trans people. They don't care about trans people. The goal of them doing that is to promote regime change against China, right? For Americans to say, look, China doesn't have our cultural values. Therefore, we should invade them or we should not like them. We should see them as some kind of, they're not people like us or they're not as advanced as us. We need to bring them civilization, which has always been the argument of the imperialists, right? Even when it was religion. Oh, we need to spread Christianity to them because they're uncivilized and we have the civilized religion. We have the civilized cultural values, right? You just need to let countries develop on their own. And like Venezuela, for example, there's all these movements in Venezuela, like grassroots efforts since the Bolivarian Revolution has begun to push for like abortion in abortion clinics and, more progressive laws in terms of women. Right. And I support that 100%. I put all my support behind those movements. Yeah. Like get after it. But I wouldn't support the U.S., saying, look, Venezuela doesn't allow abortion. Let's destroy them. Or Pedro Castillo in Peru wasn't big on abortion and LGBTQ issues. Therefore, the fact that he got cooed by right-wing oligarchs is a good thing. It's not a good thing, right? It's them weaponizing culture war issues to try and promote regime change. So, yeah, I guess that's all I have to say on it. That's my nuanced-ish opinion. Thank you so much, Christopher. You Duck Hash Browns, thank you so much. $10 and a YouTube member. Look at that. Thank you all so much. Really, really, really appreciate the super chats here today. You knew the farm kids by the smell half the time. They usually work before school. You bet they did. The good old SP. Ha ha ha. That's funny. Who are you, Duck Hash Browns? I'm sure I know you in real life, but yeah, you could. I wish I could say my friend's name, but we had this friend in wrestling who would never, ever, ever, ever like brag about being on the farm or brag about being a hick or being on more country than you. But he would wake up every morning and do cow chores at 4 or 5 a.m. There was another kid like that on my college team last year who I coached who like, he would never, ever, ever, ever brag about how hard he worked, but he would work sun up to sundown. He would farm, wrestling, school, wrestling, farm, sleep. That was all he did. But he would sometimes wear like a denim jacket to weigh-ins, and that was hilarious, but he wasn't like flexing it. Leo, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. The U.S. can't be part of the ICC because their main reference to war crimes since always. Oh, maybe that. So is that why? So that countries can't challenge the U.S. through the ICC? So they're not subject to the ICC's rulings because then George Bush would be charged with war crimes? Is that it? That's interesting. Yeah, because the ICC never came after Tony Blair. They never came after Bill Clinton. They never came after George Bush. They came after Milosevic, who eventually they said there was no evidence that Milosevic was perpetuating a genocide in Yugoslavia. But they never came after George Bush or Tony Blair, who we know for a fact lied to their people in order to launch an invasion that got millions of people killed, created ISIS, strengthened Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups, threw Iraq into total chaos. What a week. Keep doing what you do. Definitely Fine Art Revolution. Thank you so much for the $10 super chat. Everybody check out the Fine Art Revolution on Instagram. They're always posting that fine art. Yeah, I love it. Thank you. Thank you all for the super chat. We got 9 super chats today. Appreciate that heavily. Very honored that people would give their hard-earned money to our project and to what we're doing. And with great power and great donations comes great responsibility. So we'll always try and use the money you guys have sent to advance the class struggle. Would supporting organic social movements not conflict with support for the current state in regards to social and cultural issues? Would the socialist state be able to officially talk about them? Yeah, well, it's them. I mean, socialist states operate democratically, right? So if enough people from the grassroots level demand something, then the socialist state should respond and enact that. Like you saw in Cuba recently with the vote on the LGBTQ laws that the people all had, and the LGBTQ protections. But before that happened, it had to be debated and it had to be discussed and people had to be educated on the issue. Right. So that's what they're trying to do in Venezuela right now is educate on the people on the issue, discuss it, get people to demand it from their state. So, it's a lot different than them demanding that the state be liberalized, right? Or that the state move towards capitalism or that the state allow for U.S. regime change efforts. It's them, the people of that country getting together and democratically trying to change something or trying to encourage the state from doing something. It's the people of that country. It's not an external country trying to enforce their cultural values onto a different country, right? It's an internal debate that's happening within the country itself. And, we're all for that. It's imperialism we're against. The R dollar is the Brazilian real. Real? I love it. Thank you, Leo. Getting super chats from all over the world today. All over the world. Love it. Love how diverse our Midwestern Marx audience is. Even though I've been told on Twitter that you're all just a bunch of Klan members and LaRoucheites and conspiracy theorists. But I don't think that's true. All right, my brain is still used to assumptions of state repression of organic movements under capitalism. Right. It's different when your state is a dictatorship of the proletariat that's supposed to express the interests of the proletariat. We're so used to a dictatorship of capital where the state is used to repress the interests of the working class, or in the case of wokeism, co-opt it. Right. There were all these uprisings across the U.S. in response to the police shooting black people. And, the ruling class did suppress it. Yes. But they probably killed all the, actual Marxist BLM leaders or locked them up in jail. But they also co-opted it. Right. Now you have all these corporations putting the BLM sticker everywhere saying, we stand in solidarity with blah, 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 even though they're the root of the problem. Capitalism is the reason that the police serve as an armed body of the bourgeois state, the capitalist controlled state. And they're the reason that the police have been so highly militarized and not trained to actually keep the peace, but trained to repress people, suppress people. So in many ways, the ruling class co-opted all that working class energy in these organic social movements to try and say, no, capitalism's fine. We just got to slap a BLM sticker and an LGBTQ sticker on all of the corporations, and then capitalism will work, and then it won't be racist. Super sticker. Thank you, Andrea, for the super sticker. That's a creepy photo you got there. That is one of the bluest eyeballs I've ever seen in my life. I like it, though. That's artsy. Thank you so much for the $5 super sticker. Cannot thank you all enough. There are not words. Marxists. Twitter is crazy. Yeah, Twitter's gotten out of control. I don't spend much time on Twitter anymore, or at least, I shouldn't say anymore. In the last week, and my life has been better for it. Some of us literally fight Nazis, but okay, right? Like, I know there are people in my audience who have literally punched people in the face for being Nazis. But sure, they're Nazis too, because they support existing socialism and they don't want to cheer on actual Nazis in Ukraine. And because I wear a Drain the Swamp hat as a joke. Oh, this is a good comment. BLM is curiously silent about Niger. Not many BLM virtue signaling in chats about Niger on YouTube. I love strong Nigerian black women. I guess BLM doesn't. Yep, exactly. And if you guys follow the Blackout movement, or there's this really good guy on TikTok who's a part of the Blackout movement called Mansa, he has covered, you know, the way that all of the BLM leaders who were actually like left wing were taken out. I'm going to try and find it. And he's been pro Niger. He's been pro, you know, all these movements internationally. But I think the real radical legs of the BLM movement were taken out from under them by the CIA, you know, by cointelpro in modern day. And it was replaced with this virtue signaling, you know, liberal movement. Otherwise, they would be talking about Niger. They would be talking about the people in Niger and their struggle against imperialism. They'd be talking about West Africa. They'd be talking about South Africa and Julius Malema. Right? That was the kind of movement that we could have, which is why the bourgeoisie needed so bad to co-opt the movement, to suppress the movement, and to push the movement towards liberalism. This might be it. COINTELPRO never ended. This isn't it, but this is good. I forgot to turn the sound on. All right, so this is just a bunch of people who were killed by the CIA. Oh, okay, here we go. This should be it here. 2.7.
Contrary to popular belief.
Okay, yes.
This is
the Blackout strike is really awesome. I've talked to this guy in the DMs. He's on like the same page as us. He's like, we need economic organizing. We need organizing against capitalism. The movement has been co-opted or suppressed. The leaders have been killed. And, you know, to really enact change, we have to move away from liberalism. So he's on board with us in advancing the class struggle. Thank you so much, Popers. And Popers, thank you so much. I think Carlos and those guys missed it the other day when we were doing a stream. You gave away like 5 YouTube memberships. Thank you so much for that, man. That is huge. That is so awesome. And so kind of you to give away those memberships to other people in the audience. So solidarity, and thank you so much for that. I really appreciate you.
contrary to popular belief. This is not the founder of BLM. The original 7 founders have all died under mysterious circumstances. Number 1, Bassem Masri, 31. Found unresponsive on a bus. Death labeled as heart attack. Similar to MKO Abiola, Adams Unaji, and Magufuli, number 2. DeAndre Joshua, 20 years old. Found dead in torched car. Similar to Walter Rodney, number 3. Darren Seals, 29 years old and also found shot in torched car. Starting to notice something odd. Wait till you hear about the final 3. The final 3 founders of BLM, Marshawn McCarroll, 23, Dane Jones, 24, and Edward Crawford, 27. All, according to the feds, allegedly took their own lives. However, the evidence says otherwise. Dane Jones, for instance, was found hanging from a tree like a modern-day lynch victim. Despite what the media says, his family believes he was lynched. They say his mental health was fine and he couldn't have even tied the knots on the tree. The sheet he used to unalive himself wasn't even his own. This isn't the first time black activists and leaders have allegedly been removed by feds. The leaked document COINTELPRO proves the FBI's involvement in the killings of black activists like Fred Hampton, MLK, and Malcolm X. Director of the FBI Edgar Hoover said in COINTELPRO, the black youth and moderate must be made to understand that if they succumb to revolutionary teaching, they will be dead revolutionaries. COINTELPRO had no end date BTW. Whenever a leader stands up for black people and mysteriously dies, read over the COINTELPRO document. Number 7, Sasha Johnson. Mrs. Johnson is indirectly responsible for the start of the Blackout strike movement at one of her protests to take down Cecil Rhodes, a notorious slave owner and exploitator of Africa.
And the Blackout strike movement is like what I was saying earlier. They're big on like, we need a mass strike. We need economic change. Their slogan is, we need systemic change, not symbolic change, or something like that. Basically, you know, a bunch of liberals and a bunch of corporations co-opting the language and the symbolism of BLM isn't real change, right? That's symbolic change, but we need actual systemic change. We need economic change. We need the system itself to be radically altered. So it doesn't surprise me that the CIA potentially took out one of the people who spawned that part of the movement.
Kanan proposed rather we focus on taking down his symbols of colonialism like a statue. Why don't we take down his corporation De Beers, which still uses child slaves to exploit Africa? But that story is for another day. Months later, Sasha was attacked by masked gunmen who escaped punishment. What strikes me most about her death and many of the leaders slain by COINTELPRO is the fact the FBI and corporations use black men to do their dirty work for them to further cause divide within the black community. Sankara was killed by France, not his adoptive brother compare. Lumumba killed my CIA, not Mobutu. Don't fight the dog when the master is behind the fence laughing. Whenever there is a mysterious death of a political figure, don't look at who the finger gets pointed at. Look at who benefits the most. After all our leaders died, they are replaced with a corrupt money laundering puppet. Mobutu, Blaise Compaoré, Paul Biya, and the new founder of BLM. For more info on leaders slain by COINTELPRO, check the website theblackoutstrike.com.
So yeah, some people were saying this stuff scares me. Same. When I saw that, I'm like, I'm gonna die. I'm literally gonna be killed by the CIA. But it's wild. It's wild. And you know, this is how the BLM movement was co-opted. And COINTELPRO never ended. So then somebody responded to this video that Mansa did, and they criticized it for something or other. And then the Blackout strike, Mansa did an incredible response. You can watch that too.
It's time to address the controversy surrounding our video on BLM. After establishing that BLM was used to intercept and usurp grassroots movements like the Movement in Ferguson, accounts claiming to be black activists from the Movement stitched my video in order to discredit all of the information and label it all as conspiracy. I was told by her mutual to rely on boots on the ground rather than information provided by Wikipedia. Listening to her advice, I spoke to the original founder of the Movement and made a follow-up video to correct my inaccuracies. However, note that the initial page which stitched my video did not disprove the mysterious deaths of the leaders, nor contradict the original message of the post, that COINTELPRO never ended, and feds are still removing our leaders. She only clarified the separation between the movement and BLM, which I initially thanked her for. However, she rose suspicion after she blocked the original founder of the movement when he confronted her about her ties to Ferguson. She claimed to not be part of the BLM group which attempted to intercept the movement in Ferguson. After doing some research into her account and activism, we have found her present at Ferguson, Missouri, holding up BLM signs, despite her initial claims of not being a part of BLM. That, coupled with the fact she blocked the original founder and tried to discredit our page as conspiracy, has led us to believe she is a BLM plant, seeking to discredit original grassroots movements. She claims to have boots on the ground and be friends with the leaders mentioned in the video, yet has no ties to them, and has even blocked one of the actual founders. Then she proceeded to lie about her ties to the BLM organization. In this day and age, we must always be on the lookout for federal accounts masquerading as activists. Be sure to watch my follow-up video which corrected the mislabeling in the original BLM video. Aluda continua. The struggle continues. It's time to address the controversy surrounding...
So someone called him out, and it was literally a Fed. He literally looked into her information. He's like, I think this is a CIA plant, which is wild. It's wild that they got CIA plants out here on TikTok, but is this the real Jackson Hinkle? Drain the swamp. Hell yeah, brother. Solidarity. Hampton was betrayed by an insider, was he? That's what Fred not Fred Hampton. That's what Sankara was. Sankara was killed by his best friend. This guy, Blaise Compaoré. Who ended up ruling the country for the next 20 years, and he was just finally prosecuted recently. What's up? That's awesome. Thanks for being here, Jackson. I'm glad you like the hat. What was I talking about? So, yeah, I don't know. This guy didn't have obviously there wasn't complete and total proof that all the actual pro-working class members of BLM were taken out by the CIA, but they all died in mysterious circumstances, and then BLM became super, super liberal, and it became a way for activists to enrich themselves. Very, very sketchy stuff. All right. Our last topic for today is an article that I was going to put out called The Purity Fetish in Wrestling. So this will be out on Midwestern Marks soon. I took Carlos's concept of the purity fetish and I applied it to wrestling. So oftentimes, Western leftists, when they notice that somebody is flawed or somebody has a few issues, or when somebody's not perfect, they dismiss that person or that thing completely, right? Existing socialist countries like China, they're not perfect. Well, then they're evil dictatorships. And I'm going to repeat all the imperialist propaganda that's been put out about China, right? Or there's a singer like Oliver Anthony who made one line about welfare that you don't like. Well, who cares that 95% of the song was about class struggle and was about the American working class? I hate the song because it's not perfect and it doesn't meet my purity fetish, this ideal that I've invented in my head that everybody and everything has to live up to. Right? So that's the concept of the purity fetish, and I applied it to wrestling. And I thought about it because of this experience I had coaching my brother last year, who got fourth at the NCAA tournament. He would do a wrestling move, like he would shoot a shot, and if it wasn't perfect, if I would give him resistance and kind of stuff his shot, he would go, fuck, like, damn it, I missed a shot. Like, I suck. His confidence would go down if he didn't hit the move perfect every time, if it wasn't ideal every time. And I was like, well, dude, and I'm giving you resistance on purpose because in a match, it's not going to be ideal. You're not just going to set it up, shoot, and finish super easy. Like, the guys you're going to be wrestling at the national tournament are good, right? And more important, like, rather than trying to be perfect, you should be determined, right? So if I take a shot and the guy gives me hips and I get extended a little bit, I'm not just going to give up and be like, dang it, I'm going to drive through that shot, right? I'm going to fight out of that imperfect position. And oftentimes the best wrestlers aren't the ones who can execute the most precise technique, the most ideal technique. It's the ones who can keep fighting through bad positions and who can chain their moves together. All right. So what I said in this article is that that's the purity fetish. This idea that I suck, I need to lose confidence if I don't hit all my moves perfectly, if I don't execute everything perfectly, because nobody's ever going to execute everything perfectly, right? This ideal world that Western leftists create in their heads, it doesn't exist, right? It doesn't exist in reality. Reality is imperfect. Reality requires struggle. Reality requires working yourself out of terrible situations. Sometimes it involves hitting rock bottom and having to bounce back from that, right? But what are you going to do? Are you going to sit around and be like, dang it, I wish the world was perfect. I wish everything was the way I wanted it to be, and I'm going to get mad when it's not, right? Or are you going to engage with the world for what it is, right? Are you going to deal with things for what they are? Yeah, maybe you didn't like Oliver Anthony's welfare line in the song, but it's still a song that's blowing up across America because it's about class struggle, because it's about the alienation suffered by the working class. So what does more good? Does it do more good to line up an interview with Oliver Anthony and try and tell him about Marxism and try and get him to show solidarity with the labor movement? Or does it do more good to just shit on him and cancel on him or cancel him and tweet about how mean he is because he said bad things about welfare? Right? It's not strategic. It's wishing that there was some ideal working class that already agreed with all of your views and already agreed with all of your positions on everything, including culture war stuff, rather than engaging with the working class for what it is, which is flawed and imperfect, because human beings are flawed and imperfect. None of us are perfect. None of us are ideal, right? So we want to engage with the world for what it is, not, sit around and lament the fact that the world isn't what we imagine it could be in our heads. We do want to imagine a better world. Like, we want to understand what we're moving towards in terms of socialism and communism. But we also need to understand that socialism and communism need to be built out of our current conditions, right? This is what socialism, utopian, and scientific is about. We can't just make up communism and establish it tomorrow. This is what a communist system looks like. Let's establish it. No, we first need to lead the struggle of the working class. And to do that, we need to understand our working class. What are their values? What do they like? What are their problems? How can we organize them or get them to organize collectively against the ruling class, against the exploiting class, right? And sitting around saying that, all the working class people are a basket of deplorables until they accept all of my enlightened social views, that's not going to get us anywhere, right? That's just lamenting the fact that the world isn't this ideal that you've created in your head of what the world should be. And what inspired me to write this article was, one, the fact that I've been wrestling like 27 times a day. But two, Carlos sent me this quote from the American philosopher John Dewey. Oliver Anthony is speaking pure facts. I agree 100%, brother. And that's why we're having him on September 3rd. September 3rd, Oliver Anthony will be on Midwestern Marx talking about class struggle and talking about his song. And we're going to try and get him to show solidarity with the labor movement here in the U.S. So should be awesome. But this is the quote Carlos said. Persistent preoccupation with the thought of an ideal realm breeds morbid discontent with surroundings, or induces a futile withdrawal into an inner world where all facts are fair to the eye. The needs of actual conditions are neglected or dealt with in a half-hearted way, because in light of the ideal, they are so mean and sordid. To speak of evils, to strive seriously for change, shows a low mind, or again, the ideal becomes a refuge, an asylum, a way of escape from tiresome responsibilities. In varied ways, men come to live in two worlds, one the actual, the other the ideal. Some are tortured by the sense of their irreconcilability, the fact that the real world isn't what the ideal we imagine in our heads. Others alternate between the two, compensating for the strains of renunciation involved in membership in the ideal realm by pleasurable excursions into the delights of the actual. So that's what inspired me, that Dewey quote about, people who imagine this ideal world, imagine what the world should be, and then lash out against the real world for not being perfect. Lash out against the working class for not having all the enlightened social views of a liberal college student, right? That is purity fetishism, and we have to get over that. We have to get over that if we want to advance the class struggle in this country. Right, you have to be able to talk to working class Trump supporters. It just is what it is. We got to stop thinking in terms of purity and start thinking in terms of reality, in terms of the material, in terms of what's real, what's actual. How is a 2-point reversal similar to a counter-revolution? Oh, bro, I'm like the only one who probably found that funny. Dwayne Vogel, amen, Eddie. Thank you. Is Hinkle a Marxist? I'm pretty sure he's a Marxist-Leninist. How is a 2-point reversal? So a 2-point reversal is like if the opponent takes me down and then I hit a move where I get back on top of him immediately. And they're both worth 2 points. The takedown's worth 2 points and the reversal is worth 2 points. So it's like if you get taken down, the working class takes down the bourgeoisie, and then the bourgeoisie reclaims power. They get right back on top. That's like a 2-point reversal. The same as a counter-revolution. The working class takes power, and then the bourgeoisie seizes it back. It's a counter-revolution. Reversal. 2. So yeah, look forward to that article, MidwesternMarks.com. The wrestling and the purity fetish is what it's going to be called. Noah's editing it today, and I'm sure we'll have it up by tonight. We've also got our interview with Roland Bohr coming up, either today or tomorrow. Today or tomorrow. We're going to be talking about religion and Marxism. The Soviet Union got 2-point reversed. They did. Saddest day of my life. I wasn't alive, but one of the saddest days in human history when the U.S. empire went reversal 2. They hit a switch. But yeah, we're talking about a country where socialism hasn't been overthrown. We're going to be talking about China. Actually, first we're going to be talking about religion and Marxism, because Roland Bohr was raised in an evangelical Christian family like myself, and he has his degree in theology. I don't know. He was a theologian for many years, so he talks about the compatibility or the irreconcilability in certain ways of Marxism and religion. And then we're going to do another interview and talk to him about China and existing socialism. So, yeah, it should be fun. So look out for that tonight. Besides that, make sure you subscribe to Midwestern Marks, like and share the stream with your friends. Don't fall into Trump derangement syndrome. Don't fall into the purity fetish. Join wrestling and read Capital Volume 3. All right, that's all I got for you, comrades. Solidarity. We'll see you next time.
Without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.